On May 9, 2025, Moscow's Red Square hosted Russia's annual Victory Day celebrations, marking the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. This event, one of the most significant in Russia's political and cultural calendar, featured a grand military parade and a keynote speech by President Vladimir Putin. The 2025 Victory Day was particularly notable due to the ongoing war in Ukraine, heightened geopolitical tensions, and the presence of numerous foreign leaders, including Chinese President Xi Jinping. Putin's speech, the parade, and the broader context of the event served as a platform for projecting Russia's military strength, reinforcing domestic unity, and delivering pointed geopolitical messages to both domestic and international audiences. This comprehensive analysis explores the multifaceted dimensions of Putin's 2025 Victory Day speech, delving into its historical context, thematic content, the military parade's symbolism, the Ukraine conflict's role in the narrative, international reactions, and the broader geopolitical messaging. By examining these elements, this essay aims to provide a highly informative and detailed understanding of the event's significance in Russia's political strategy and its implications for global affairs. The analysis draws on a wide range of sources, including news reports, expert commentary, and historical parallels, to present a nuanced perspective on an event that encapsulates Russia's current worldview and ambitions. Victory Day, celebrated annually on May 9th, commemorates the Soviet Union's defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945, an event known in Russia as the Great Patriotic War from 1941 to 1945. The Soviet Union's contribution to the Allied victory was immense, with an estimated 27 million Soviet citizens, soldiers and civilians losing their lives, a figure that some scholars argue could be as high as 42 million. This staggering loss, coupled with the Red Army's pivotal role in battles such as Stalingrad and Kursk, cemented the war's significance in Russia's national identity. Victory Day is not merely a historical commemoration, but a cornerstone of Russian patriotism, symbolizing resilience, sacrifice, and the defense of the motherland against existential threats. During the Soviet era, Victory Day was a major state holiday, but its prominence grew under Putin's leadership. Since assuming power in 2000, Putin has revitalized the holiday, transforming it into a spectacle of military might and national unity. The Red Square military parade, a hallmark of the celebrations, showcases Russia's armed forces and serves as a reminder of its historical and contemporary power. The holiday also reinforces the narrative of Russia as a great power, wronged by the West and perpetually under threat, a theme that has become central to Kremlin propaganda. In 2025, the 80th anniversary added an extra layer of significance. The milestone anniversary coincided with a critical juncture in Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine, which began with the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and escalated into a full-scale invasion in February 2022. The war has reshaped Russia's domestic and international landscape, making Victory Day 2025 a crucial moment for Putin to rally support, counter Western narratives, and project resilience amid economic sanctions and military challenges. Putin's 2025 Victory Day speech was a carefully crafted blend of historical reverence, patriotic fervor, and geopolitical messaging. Delivered before thousands of troops, veterans, and international dignitaries, the address reinforced recurring Kremlin narratives while adapting to the evolving context of the Ukraine conflict and global diplomacy. A central pillar of Putin's speech was the framing of Russia's current actions, particularly the war in Ukraine, as a continuation of the Soviet Union's fight against Nazism. Putin invoked the heroism of World War II veterans, emphasizing their sacrifices and drawing direct parallels to Russian soldiers fighting in Ukraine, whom he referred to as participants in the special military operation. This narrative casts the Ukraine conflict as a sacred struggle to protect Russia's sovereignty and historical legacy, mirroring the existential battle against Nazi Germany. By linking the two conflicts, Putin sought to legitimize the war in Ukraine as a righteous cause, portraying Russian forces as defenders of the same values that underpinned the Soviet victory in 1945. He stated that the Soviet Union determined the outcome of World War II, a claim that minimizes the contributions of other Allied powers, such as the United States and the United Kingdom, and reinforces Russia's self-image as the primary victor over fascism. This historical revisionism serves to elevate Russia's global standing and justify its actions in Ukraine as a defense against perceived modern-day threats. Putin's speech was replete with accusations against the West, which he portrayed as a source of ideological and existential threats to Russia. He claimed that Western nations promote Russophobia, historical revisionism, and ideologies akin to Nazism, accusing them of distorting the truth about World War II to undermine Russia's legacy. Putin asserted that Russia would remain an indestructible barrier against Nazism, Russophobia, anti-Semitism, positioning the country as a moral and ideological counterweight to Western influence. This theme is consistent with Putin's long-standing narrative of the West as a decadent, aggressive force seeking to weaken Russia through cultural, economic, and military means. By invoking terms like Western globalist elites and colonial policy based on hypocrisy and lies, Putin tapped into a populist rhetoric that resonates with domestic audiences and aligns with the Kremlin's disinformation campaigns. These accusations also serve to deflect criticism of Russia's actions in Ukraine, framing the conflict as a defensive response to Western aggression. A recurring motif in Putin's speech was the call for national unity and patriotism, echoing the collective resolve of the Soviet people during World War II. He claimed that the whole of Russia supported the war in Ukraine, presenting a unified front despite growing domestic challenges, such as economic strain and dissent. Putin emphasized the importance of preserving Russian culture, traditions, and values, urging citizens to rally behind the state in the face of external threats. This appeal to patriotism is a hallmark of Putin's leadership, particularly during times of crisis. By invoking the memory of the Great Patriotic War, he sought to galvanize public support for the Ukraine conflict, portraying it as a shared national endeavor. The presence of veterans and soldiers in Red Square, coupled with the participation of troops who had fought in Ukraine, reinforced the visual and emotional connection between past and present struggles. Putin's speech included sharp criticism of Western actions, particularly their support for Ukraine and sanctions against Russia. He accused Western elites of fostering conflicts, promoting aggressive nationalism, and attempting to erase Russia's historical contributions to World War II. This critique aligns with the Kremlin's broader narrative of the West as a hypocritical, imperialist force that seeks to suppress Russia's rightful place in the world. The speech also addressed the issue of historical revisionism, with Putin claiming that the West distorts the truth about World War II to serve its geopolitical agenda. This accusation is part of a long-standing Russian effort to control the narrative surrounding the war, particularly in response to Eastern European countries that have sought to highlight Soviet-era repressions alongside Nazi atrocities. By framing Western actions as an assault on history, Putin positioned Russia as a defender of truth and justice, further justifying its military and diplomatic stance. The military parade on May 9, 2025, was the largest since the onset of the Ukraine conflict in 2022, reflecting Russia's determination to project strength despite battlefield challenges and international isolation. The parade featured over 11,000 troops, advanced military hardware, and for the first time, a column of combat drones highlighting their increasing role in modern warfare. The 2025 parade was a significant escalation from the scaled-back events of 2023 and 2024, which had been constrained by security concerns and equipment shortages. It included approximately 11,000 soldiers marching through Red Square, including 1,500 who had fought in Ukraine. The parade was led by General Oleg Salyukov, commander of Russia's ground forces, and inspected by Defense Minister Andrei Belousov. The display featured nuclear-capable Yars intercontinental ballistic missiles, S-400 air defense systems, tanks, and a variety of drones, reflecting Russia's technological advancements in unmanned warfare. A Soviet-era T-34 tank, a symbol of World War II victory, was included, reinforcing the historical narrative. Troops from allied nations, including China, Egypt, Vietnam, and several post-Soviet states participated, symbolizing Russia's international alliances. Notably, North Korean troops were excluded from marching to avoid embarrassing foreign guests, but were prominently seated in the viewing stands. The inclusion of drones was a new feature, reflecting their critical role in the Ukraine conflict. Putin noted that Russia produced 1.5 million drones in the previous year, a tenfold increase from 2 years prior, underscoring the country's adaptation to modern warfare. In this section, we delve into the symbolism and messaging of the parade. The event was meticulously crafted to convey specific narratives, both domestically and internationally. Every element, from the choice of military hardware to the speeches, and even the participants, was chosen to send a clear message about Russia's strength, resilience, and unity. For Russians, the parade was a display of national pride and military prowess, reinforcing the narrative of a strong, united Russia capable of overcoming external challenges. The presence of Ukraine war veterans linked the current conflict to the revered legacy of World War II, boosting morale and justifying sacrifices. The parade signaled to adversaries, particularly the West, that Russia remains a formidable military power despite sanctions and battlefield setbacks. The participation of foreign troops and leaders countered Western efforts to isolate Russia, showcasing a coalition of supportive nations. The prominent role of Chinese troops in Xi Jinping's attendance highlighted the deepening Russia-China partnership, a strategic counterweight to Western influence. The presence of leaders from Brazil, Venezuela, and other global South nations further underscored Russia's outreach to non-Western powers. The 2025 parade took place under heightened security due to fears of Ukrainian drone attacks. In the days leading up to the event, Ukrainian strikes disrupted Moscow's airports, prompting airspace closures and fueling anxiety in the capital. Russia implemented stringent security measures, including heavy restrictions in central Moscow, and the cancellation of parades in occupied territories like Crimea due to safety concerns. Putin announced a unilateral 3-day ceasefire from May 7th to May 9th to protect the parade, a move dismissed by Ukraine as a theatrical performance. Ukrainian officials reported nearly 200 clashes and thousands of Russian attacks during the supposed truce, highlighting its ineffectiveness. The ceasefire proposal was seen as a tactic to project Russia's goodwill while avoiding embarrassment during the high-profile event. The war in Ukraine, now in its 4th year as of 2025, was a central theme in Putin's speech and the broader Victory Day celebrations. The conflict, which began with Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and escalated into a full-scale invasion in February 2022, has profoundly shaped Russia's domestic and international landscape. Below is an analysis of how Putin integrated the Ukraine conflict into his Victory Day narrative.
And action.
Putin consistently referred to the Ukraine war as a special military operation, a euphemism used to downplay the invasion's scale and maintain domestic support. He portrayed the conflict as a defensive response to Western aggression and Ukrainian Nazism, echoing false narratives propagated since 2014. By drawing parallels to World War II, Putin cast Russian soldiers as modern-day heroes fighting to protect Russia's sovereignty and liberate Ukraine from a supposed neo-Nazi regime. This framing is rooted in a broader Kremlin strategy to depict Ukraine as a puppet of Western powers, particularly the United States and NATO, bent on encircling and weakening Russia. Putin's speech avoided acknowledging Russian military setbacks or the war's high human and economic costs, instead emphasizing the unity and resolve of the Russian people. The unilateral 3-day ceasefire announced by Putin for Victory Day was a contentious element of the 2025 celebrations. The Kremlin claimed the truce demonstrated Russia's readiness for peace, But Ukrainian officials and analysts viewed it as a cynical ploy to protect the parade and ease Russia's international isolation. Ukraine rejected the proposal, advocating for a 30-day unconditional ceasefire backed by the United States. Reports indicated that the ceasefire was violated almost immediately, with Ukraine documenting nearly 200 frontline clashes, 18 Russian airstrikes, and thousands of shelling incidents during the truce period. Russia, in turn, accused Ukraine of hundreds of violations, though it provided little evidence. The ceasefire's failure underscored the lack of trust between the two sides and highlighted Russia's strategic use of peace gestures to manipulate international perceptions. By May 2025, Russian forces had made significant gains in Ukraine, particularly in the Donbas region, following a challenging first 2 years of the invasion. The deployment of North Korean troops in Russia's Kursk region, where Ukrainian forces had gained ground, was a notable development. Putin personally greeted North Korean General Kim Yong-bok during the parade, signaling the growing military cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang. The parade's emphasis on drones reflected their critical role in the Ukraine conflict, where both sides have increasingly relied on unmanned systems for reconnaissance and strikes. Russia's reported production of 1.5 million drones in the previous year highlighted its adaptation to modern warfare, despite Western sanctions aimed at limiting its technological capabilities. The 2025 Victory Day celebrations elicited a wide range of reactions from the international community, reflecting the polarized global response to Russia's actions in Ukraine and its broader geopolitical stance. Below is a detailed overview of key reactions. Ukrainian officials and analysts condemned the Victory Day parade as a parade of cynicism, accusing Putin of exploiting World War II imagery to justify aggression and mask Russia's battlefield failures. President Volodymyr Zelensky dismissed the ceasefire proposal as a theatrical show designed to protect the parade rather than advance peace. In a video address, Zelensky called for a real ceasefire, emphasizing that Ukraine would not tolerate Russia's continued attacks. Ukrainian military analyst Mikhailo Samus argued that the parade was a legitimate military target, but noted that Ukraine was unlikely to attack due to the presence of foreign leaders, which could strain relations with neutral or allied nations. Ukraine's ongoing drone strikes on Russian territory, including disruptions to Moscow's airports, were seen as an attempt to humiliate Putin and signal disapproval of foreign leaders' attendance. The presence of over 20 foreign leaders, including Xi Jinping, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, and North Korean representatives, was a significant propaganda coup for Russia. Xi's attendance, coupled with Chinese troops marching in the parade, underscored the strategic partnership between Russia and China, which has deepened since the Ukraine conflict began. Leaders from post-Soviet states, such as Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan, also attended, though some reports suggested their participation was reluctant, reflecting a desire to maintain relations with Russia without fully endorsing its war. The attendance of Global South leaders, such as those from Brazil and Vietnam, highlighted Russia's efforts to court non-Western nations and counter Western isolation. Putin's 2025 Victory Day speech and the accompanying parade were meticulously designed to serve multiple strategic objectives, leveraging historical narratives, military displays, and international diplomacy to advance Russia's interests. Below is an analysis of the key elements of this messaging. The invocation of World War II was a deliberate strategy to galvanize domestic support and frame the Ukraine conflict as a righteous cause. By portraying Russian soldiers as heirs to the Soviet victory, Putin tapped into a deeply ingrained sense of national pride and sacrifice. This narrative is particularly potent in Russia, where the Great Patriotic War is considered a sacred event, akin to a state religion. The historical parallel also served to dehumanize Ukraine's leadership, falsely labeled as neo-Nazis, and justify Russia's military actions as a moral imperative. This rhetoric, while factually baseless, resonates with Russian audiences conditioned by years of state propaganda. Putin's speech positioned Russia as a defender against external threats, both ideological and military. By accusing the West of Russophobia and historical revisionism, he framed Russia as a victim of aggression, forced to protect its sovereignty and values. This portrayal deflects criticism of Russia's actions in Ukraine and shifts blame onto Western powers, aligning with the Kremlin's broader disinformation strategy. The emphasis on Russia's strategic forces being always ready for combat was a direct message to the West, signaling that Russia would not be intimidated by sanctions or military support for Ukraine. This rhetoric reinforces Russia's image as a resilient, unyielding power, capable of withstanding external pressures. The parade's display of advanced weaponry, including nuclear-capable missiles and drones, was a clear demonstration of Russia's military capabilities. Despite equipment losses in Ukraine, the parade aimed to project an image of strength and technological advancement. The inclusion of foreign troops, particularly from China, signaled that Russia is not isolated, but part of a broader coalition of powers. The focus on drones highlighted Russia's adaptation to modern warfare, a response to the evolving nature of the Ukraine conflict. By showcasing its drone production capabilities, Russia sought to counter Western narratives of its military decline and assert its technological prowess. The attendance of over 20 foreign leaders was a critical element of Russia's propaganda strategy, countering Western efforts to isolate Moscow. The presence of Xi Jinping in particular was a powerful symbol of Russia's strategic alignment with China, a partnership that has grown in response to Western sanctions. The participation of Global South leaders further underscored Russia's appeal to non-Western nations, many of which have refrained from condemning the invasion of Ukraine. This diplomatic success was amplified by Russian state media, which portrayed the parade as evidence of Russia's enduring global influence. However, the reluctant attendance of some leaders, such as those from Central Asia, suggested that Russia's influence remains contested, even among traditional allies. Putin's speech and the parade were designed to bolster domestic support at a time of economic hardship and military strain. By invoking the Great Patriotic War, Putin tapped into a unifying narrative that transcends political divisions, reinforcing his image as a protector of Russia's heritage and sovereignty. The emphasis on national unity and patriotism aimed to counter dissent and war fatigue, which have grown as the conflict drags on. However, the speech's failure to address the war's costs, estimated at 800,000 Russian casualties and severe economic sanctions, may limit its effectiveness in sustaining public support over the long term. Reports of domestic criticism, such as oligarch Andrei Kovalev's public condemnation of the war in 2023, suggest that cracks in public support persist. The parade and speech signaled Russia's commitment to a protracted conflict in Ukraine, with no indication of willingness to negotiate on terms favorable to Kyiv. The display of military hardware and the presence of North Korean troops underscored Russia's determination to maintain pressure on Ukraine, even as it faces challenges on the battlefield. The ceasefire's failure and ongoing Russian attacks during the truce period highlighted the lack of progress toward peace, raising concerns about further escalation. The involvement of North Korean forces and Russia's growing reliance on Allied support could complicate the conflict's dynamics, potentially drawing in other actors. The 2025 Victory Day celebrations underscored Russia's pivot toward non-Western powers, particularly China, North Korea, and the Global South. The presence of Xi Jinping and other leaders signaled a deepening of these alliances, which provide Russia with economic and military support in the face of Western sanctions. This realignment challenges the Western-led international order, creating a multipolar dynamic that complicates global diplomacy. However, Russia's reliance on authoritarian allies like North Korea and Iran may alienate neutral nations and limit its appeal in the Global South, where many countries prefer to avoid entanglement in great power rivalries. The attendance of Central Asian leaders, described as reluctant by some analysts, suggests that Russia's influence in its traditional sphere is not guaranteed. The event highlighted divisions within the Western alliance, particularly with the Trump administration's push for a quick resolution to the Ukraine conflict. Trump's engagement with Moscow, including discussions with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, raised concerns among European allies about a potential weakening of support for Ukraine. Germany's commitment to Ukraine under Chancellor Merz contrasted with the rise of pro-Russia sentiments in some European far-right movements, illustrating the challenges of maintaining a unified Western front. The EU's call for a war crimes tribunal and continued sanctions signaled a long-term strategy to hold Russia accountable, but the effectiveness of these measures depends on sustained political will and economic resources. The parade's success in attracting foreign leaders underscored the limits of Western isolation efforts, forcing policymakers to reassess their approach to countering Russia's influence. President Vladimir Putin's 2025 Victory Day speech and the accompanying military parade were a masterclass in political theater, blending historical reverence, patriotic fervor, and geopolitical maneuvering to advance Russia's interests. By framing the Ukraine conflict as a continuation of the Soviet Union's fight against Nazism, Putin sought to legitimize the war rally domestic support and counter Western narratives of Russian aggression. The parade's display of military might, coupled with the attendance of over 20 foreign leaders, projected an image of strength and resilience, challenging Western efforts to isolate Moscow. However, the event also revealed the complexities of Russia's position. The failure of the ceasefire, ongoing battlefield challenges, and domestic economic strains underscored the costs of the Ukraine conflict, which Putin's speech carefully avoided addressing. International reactions, ranging from Ukrainian condemnation to Western criticism and Allied support, highlighted the polarized global response to Russia's actions. The deepening partnership with China and outreach to the global south signaled a strategic pivot, but Russia's reliance on authoritarian allies and contested influence in its near abroad suggest limits to its global ambitions. The 2025 Victory Day celebrations will likely be remembered as a pivotal moment in Russia's ongoing confrontation with the West, encapsulating both its determination to assert its great power status and the challenges it faces in sustaining a protracted conflict. As the war in Ukraine continues and global alignments shift, the themes and messages of Putin's speech will reverberate, shaping Russia's domestic politics and international relations in the years to come.